Your energy.
Your energy. Okay, welcome to TimTomTalks. This week focusing on igniting trust. Tom, good to see you as always.
Oh, yes. Dr. Tom Allen Liebenois in Los Angeles, California, and Tim in Australia, south of Sydney.
South of Sydney, indeed, indeed, indeed. And the sun is shining, and it's a beautiful autumn morning here.
It's cloudy here. It's a bit cloudy here, but it's nice. It's nice to have a cool day. I'm sure we'll get to the hot days soon enough.
Well, we're in these, sort of, I think it's probably about 4 months when we kind of climatically overlap, and we're both wearing similar clothing, and then you get warmer and I get colder, and then we reverse the cycle. So
yeah. So when we're talking about igniting trust, it was what's funny is we were working on some other projects before we started this live, and we got on a topic that we need to talk about this. And what we decided to talk about is how we show up virtually to build trust.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to have a relatively narrow focus here today. I mean, all of these topics that we're focusing on in these broadcasts as we go, basically well-being, trust, uncertainty, well-being, trust, uncertainty. They're big topics. So we're going to cycle into different elements of them. So we're not going to spend a lot of time today, or really any time today, talking about what trust is, the broad spectrum of all of the different ways that you can build it. We're going to try and make this topical, and in particular at the moment, there's a lot of interactions going on virtually. And the thing specifically that Tom and I were talking about a little bit earlier today was how people are learning in a virtual environment, and essentially how the trainer,
how people are teaching and coaching.
Yeah, so how the trainers and instructors and teachers are showing up, and this interesting series of interactions and exchanges we've had. So Tom, do you want to start this one?
I mean, because we started talking about, and everybody has experienced these. You go to a webinar because you think you're going to learn something from it, and then all of a sudden you realize it's a pre-recorded one. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm at a pre-recorded webinar, I'm thinking, well, they really didn't care enough, and hopefully they're not going to try and sell me something at the end, and especially a big ticket item, because I have no trust built up with that. Maybe I get some information, maybe it's something that I need, very hands-off, and it does not ignite any trust in me. However, I've been to a couple of challenges, a summit that was done online. It was a 3-day summit. And I'm telling you, these guys built, the first one was very, I liked the information, and I got information about it, and I trusted the information, but I didn't build a connection. But the second one, I completely built a connection based on the value of the information and how they delivered it and how they showed up. And it was completely different. And I'm so excited with working with them on this particular project. But the others, I'm going to do one project, and the other thing, I've already forgotten what the webinar was about. You, Tim? I did. It's like I already wrote it off. It does nothing for me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think it'd be good to do a bit of a dive into what these guys have done that you feel you've built the trust with. But let me sort of share a little bit on my side, and then we'll get a little bit into the what works and what's not working so well. So I've done a bunch of online digital courses over the last few months, and I was also reflecting back on some that I did years ago. I think the thing that really seems to stand out, or rather jump out, in the comparison across the different courses that I've done, is you really have to set the expectation very clearly, and recognize that there are implicit things as you're setting expectations. And then once you've set the expectation, you've really got to show up and meet the expectation that you've set. So for example, I went through a course going back a few years now, where I suspect a little bit like this one that you've done, Tom, the webinars and seminars were set at specific times, you know, with this idea that if you didn't show up at the time, you were going to miss out. And then very quickly, I realized that the recordings were all broadcast, pre-recorded, right? So there was no necessity for me to be there on time whatsoever, because not only were the recordings pre-recorded, but there was no space within the schedule in any way for the people who were there, I believe, in real time, to actually make a contribution and add value to each other's experiences. It was just basically rock up together virtually, watch a pre-recording, and then go off and work your way through the preset stuff. So a comparison, I've just finished this executive course with the University of Cambridge, and everything in this course is preset, preloaded, and pre-recorded. And it's all available online. You can study in your own time. So exactly the same content structure, but the design of the course is such that there's a very interactive forum of real people who, and part of the assessment criteria is to interact with each other in the forum. But it's completely spontaneous when you do it, and there's a lot of real language and, you know, real life constructs and examples being used, and vulnerability being expressed, which we'll touch on, I think, as a specific point at some point during this conversation. So I think, you know, the expectations there are everything's pre-recorded. You can get to it in your own time. You're not going to miss out on anything, but you also need to go and interact in this live virtual space, you know, in a meaningful way and show up for your fellow students. But there's no like time limit on when you're going to do that. And then I too have been in live rooms, you know, and you know, within our business we run these rooms, and it really is all dependent on the live interaction and what you do in the space at the time. But then that expectation is very clearly set as well. So yeah. I think the handover point for me is it's all about how you set the expectation and then you fulfill that expectation. Back to you, Tom.
Well, yes, yes, that's always important. Oh, nice.
Sorry.
He's playing with how we're seeing. Anyway, we're dancing around. So what I will say is that I'm going to give the example of my schooling, but I have also found this in managing and leading virtual teams and in my study, because my research is on virtual work. So my first master's and this last program I did this last week that I really connected with, what they did is that they had live presenters. They intermix some pre-done material. They had live sessions, breakout groups, and that first master's had the same thing. And you were able to interact with others. You were able to talk to the instructor and the people within the group. You were able to connect with people. You were able to learn in different modes. And it was very interactive. So it was very engaging, and you could actually build trust by the interactions you were having. Conversely, my second master's and my doctorate were done online, not in multimedia. The groups were felt kind of forced, and how you worked with people in certain projects seemed kind of forced. However, when I worked with my chair, which is the one-on-one, in doing my dissertation, methodologists, and anybody else I needed to work with in doing my virtual work and doing my virtual research, I was able to build relationships with, because they had relevant information and knowledge to what I needed, and I could provide them information, they could provide me information, and it was collaborative. So it was worthwhile that we could build trust by being accountable, responsible, and sharing knowledge. So there's different ways to build trust, but the key is collaboration, interaction, and sharing.
And also, one thing that really comes out to me about what you've just said there is there's the element of choice as well.
Yes.
Right. The thing that really you kind of resisted was that feeling like groups were forced together. Whereas perhaps if you had an element of choice in kind of choosing who you interact with, and I think that's really relevant in organizational context as well, right? Because in project teams and through shifts in organizational design, or something like a merger being the most extreme version, or even just simply rocking up in a new team for the first time, that element of, am I choosing to be here? Am I choosing who I work with? I think is also really relevant to how I feel.
Oh no. Oh. Hello.
Welcome to our dog-friendly live broadcast, although they're not that friendly at the moment.
Absolutely. Oh my God, that was like the weirdest sound that just came out of my ceiling. Or is it in my ears? Or is it me? If I pass out, you know what happened. I was hearing noises after the dogs. No, yeah, my dogs lay right next to me, and normally I walk them at this time, but because I have things back to back to back, I asked my wonderful husband to do that for me, which he agreed, just not so quietly.
Okay, so come on, back to igniting trust. So how are we gonna move to?
You need to move closer to your mic.
Learning from these experiences, so that we can say, okay, so if you're in this mode, because that's yes, we're talking about learning courses and designed educational spaces, but I think that the role of facilitating is becoming increasingly prevalent in leadership, right? That you need to create a space for your team to operate in. It's not just about you rocking up and saying, this is what we're here to do today. You need to curate the landscape that your team is going to operate within. So how are we going to do that, igniting trust? Ways, things that we need to focus on. So Tom, what suggestions would you have once you found your notification?
Something happened that I could barely hear what the question was. Have you turned all the way up now?
All right. Well, I'm just muting Dr. Tom for a minute while he figures out what's going on with his computer. You're good. All right. So the question was, how can we give some guidance about ways in which leaders can use trust and the things that we've experienced, what can they learn from to build trust within their teams?
When it comes to virtual work, and especially when it comes to hybrid work, it's going to be incumbent upon the leaders to have clear communication, have clear roles, have clear responsibilities, and for the people in the teams or in the groups to be accountable, show up on time, and to be free with information. And another big one, and this is for high performing teams, virtually or not, but the equal amount that people share. Now, some people, you'll always have a talker and maybe somebody who's quiet, but it's so important for that quiet person to also have time to speak or encourage them to speak, because what they have found in high performing teams is that if the sharing and knowledge sharing is more equal across the group, they will actually build trust faster and more significantly.
Mm-hmm. So how do we, well, there may be a rabbit hole, but let's just go in it and maybe out of it quickly. How do we encourage people who are less inclined to speak up to do so in a virtual environment?
Well, you know what? I've thought about this a lot. Lately, I haven't been in that mode because everybody is very open to speak, and I haven't been working with a group, and it's odd right now, but normally I'll always have a group that I have someone like that. And today, what I would do is I would just say up front, as one of the values of this team, of our group, we want to hear everyone's opinion. And we really want to know where everybody is sitting in a project, in their part of the group or whatever. So either do a roundtable and have everybody speak on a specific topic, because usually people who are quiet do not want to speak on any, if you give them an open-ended area, just say, okay, we're going to be talking about this today. How is this working for each one in the group? Each of you have, make that time short. You can say 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, because again, those people aren't going to be chatting, but you want to give enough time for each person to share what it is you're asking them to share. I think that's probably the safest, cleanest way, and just say, position it as an expectation of the group.
Sure. So back to expectations, very, very clear. I think, and that I would add to that is, I think as a leader, you can act potentially first or early, and act in a way that enhances the level of safety in the room. And I think one of the areas that really enhances trust is vulnerability, and particularly vulnerability emanating from talking about things that didn't go well or admitting a mistake. And I've certainly been in rooms where as soon as a leader or someone in authority within the group, shares some vulnerability, especially admitting a mistake, you can sort of sense the level of pressure in the group go down almost immediately, and also see a rise in trust. Like you can almost see this physically, even in the virtual environment, you sort of see people start to move forward. And it's not just engendered out of curiosity, it's engendered out of safety. I feel safer in this group, so I'm moving towards the middle of it, and I'm moving more towards the other people that are in the group.
That is a great point, in that, in a way that we should wrap this up, is to talk about the immediate killers of trust.
Go for it.
Immediate killers of trust. Berate somebody. Do not be autocratic. Do not be accepting of failure. Tell people you want to be creative, but don't give them the time, energy, support, or tools necessary to be creative. To talk about lack of performance with no acknowledgement of what is being done correctly. To only highlight one or two people and leave everybody else behind. Can you think of a few more?
No, I mean, actually, what I've got going through my head is a conversation I had with somebody last Friday when a client who called me and said, I'm having some issues, in one of the project teams that they're working in, and this one particular leader, and they're self-aware enough, and also the person who was calling me is self-aware enough and aware of all this stuff around trust to say there's a trust issue in the group. It's being activated as an issue because this leader is in particular berating this one person. And this is an IT program office, right? Like they've got very specific deadlines, they've got marks that they need to hit, but the team's all over the world, and the leader is just like hammering on this one person. And surprise, surprise, like the level of trust is just disintegrating week on week on week, to the point where now people are starting to resign and walk away from the group, despite never sort of being impacted personally. But with that kind of behavior, I think it just builds in this inherent anticipation that it's only a matter of time until it's me.
Yeah, well, and what will happen is other people start telling on other people, and trust is out the window, and building it back up is 10 times as hard.
And that's the thing with trust. And this is talking about, that's spoken about. Was it one of those ones where I was like, am I going to say that people talk about, or that we collectively speaking about and is spoken about? So I'll just keep moving.
Wait, what was that thing we did the other day?
Thanks, Tom. So the thing with trust is that it takes time and energy and effort to create and build and earn, and it takes no time, effort, energy to destroy and disperse. Right? And it can be something.
And it's so important. It's so important for productivity and everything else. Yeah. That's what's crazy.
Yeah. Especially when, you know, people are dispersed and, you know, they're in different time zones and different cultures. You know, the way that trust and connection is built across all of those sort of dispersing elements makes it all the more important.
Don't be fooled to think that this will be any easier when you go into a hybrid model. Let me tell you that when you start working half in, half out, half virtually, half in the office, and you have teams rotating in and out, there are a lot of traps in that. Now, it's a very good thing for a lot of reasons, and I wouldn't say don't do it, but I will say there are a lot of traps in hybrid that you need to look out for. Maybe we should cover that in something else.
Well, I think we'll keep focusing on the virtual and the hybrid model. So this month we're focusing on trust, primarily looking at hybrid teams because it's something that's very much emergent to the point of common in Australia, and something that, you know, in America and other parts of the world, you know, will become prevalent in the future.
And next week is on immersing yourself.
So we'll really go deep into some of the research, some of the empiricism, and longer into some of our own stories with this next week. So we'll wrap it up here. The only other highlight, just to say that if you are signed up for our Better World Leaders kit bag, then this month it is on trust in hybrid teams. So if any of this is of interest, make sure you signed up for that, which you can do on the 4i website and insights page. Look for the click-through buttons there. And we'll be posting some of those articles later on in the weeks that follow. But if you want all that stuff as it comes, it's due out in a couple of days.
Awesome. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Morning, day.
Wherever you are, whenever it is, have a good one.
Good.